There is a moment, quiet and almost unnoticeable, when a human being first becomes aware of the strange weight inside their own chest, a weight that has no physical form, yet somehow bends thought, desire, and conscience. It happens not in a dramatic moment, not during a moral lesson or a moment of spiritual awakening, but in an ordinary hour while you're alone, scrolling, thinking, breathing, when you feel that silent pull towards something you know you shouldn't choose. And in that moment, you realize something unsettling, something ancient, something no one ever fully explained. Sin doesn't begin as an action. It begins as a psychology, a quiet drift inside the mind, a whisper, not a shout, a direction, not a decision. People often talk about sin as behavior, something visible, something measurable, but its roots grow much deeper, underground, in the soil of thought, desire, insecurity, hunger, loneliness. Before sin ever enters the world, it enters the mind. And the mind, with all its corridors and shadows, becomes the first battlefield. The psychology of sin starts with a feeling every human being knows too well, the subtle awareness of a gap between who you are and who you want to be, between what you have and what you crave, between the standards you believe in and the impulses you don't want to admit you feel. And instead of confronting that gap, instead of sitting with it, the mind tries to fill it, quickly, quietly, instinctively. That is where sin begins, not in rebellion, but in compensation, not in wickedness, but in longing. Sin rarely feels dark at first. In fact, it almost always feels like relief, like escape, like a breath of air you didn't know you were holding. It approaches gently, offering shortcuts where life has only given you slow roads. But beneath that softness lies something sharp, something that reshapes the way you think before it ever touches the way you live. The first shift is curiosity. Not dangerous curiosity, human curiosity. What if? Would it really matter? No one has to know. Curiosity becomes permission. Permission becomes justification. Justification becomes habit. And habit becomes identity. That is how psychological drift works. Not all at once, drop by drop, thought by thought, small choices that seem harmless until they become the story you're living in. There is also a strange silence to sin, a quietness that grows inside the mind, not because of guilt, but because of familiarity. The more often you step into a shadow, the less dark it feels. Your mind adapts. It normalizes. It rewires. Wrong doesn't feel wrong anymore, just comfortable. This is one of the deepest truths about the psychology of sin. The human mind can get used to anything, even things that fracture it, even things that contradict its own moral compass. And once the mind adapts, sin no longer feels like an intruder. It feels like a companion, one you didn't invite but somehow started trusting. People think sin thrives in defiance, but more often, it thrives in exhaustion. It thrives when you're tired of being strong, tired of being disciplined, tired of being the good person everyone expects you to be. Sin waits for those vulnerable moments, not with force, but with suggestion. Not break the rule, but just this once. Not turn away from the good, but don't you deserve a little comfort? Sin doesn't pressure you. It persuades you. It doesn't command. It invites. It doesn't rush. It waits, because sin understands something about human beings that humans rarely admit. We are far more motivated by emotional emptiness than by moral logic. And then comes the part no one likes to talk about, the cycle. Every sin produces two echoes, the thrill and the oath. The thrill, I needed that. The oath, I won't do it again. But the mind, once it adapts to the shortcut, to the quick relief, to the tiny escape, begins to crave the sensation more than the solution. The shortcut becomes easier than patience. The moment becomes more appealing than the meaning. And slowly the mind stops asking, is this right? And begins asking, will this help me get through today? The psychology shifts. Sin becomes self-medication. It becomes coping. It becomes familiar. And once something becomes familiar, it becomes harder to recognize as dangerous. But perhaps the most difficult truth is this. Sin doesn't only change your actions. It changes the way you see yourself. The first time you step into it, you call it a mistake. The 5th time, a pattern. The 50th time, a personality. And that is where the deepest wound begins. Not in the behavior, but in the identity that grows from it. Sin whispers not only, you want this, but also, this is who you are. And the moment it convinces you of that, the moment it alters your self-image, the battle becomes internal rather than external. Because fighting behavior is easy. Fighting identity is not. But here's the paradox. Sin's power is psychological, yet so is its undoing. Because sin thrives in secrecy, but weakens in exposure. It grows in self-judgment, but dissolves in self-awareness. It binds you through shame, but loosens when grace enters the room. The trick of sin is simple. It tries to make you believe that you must clean yourself before you can return to clarity. But the truth is quieter, gentler, more surprising. You return to clarity first, and the cleansing follows. Sin thrives when you run away from the truth. It loses its grip the moment you walk toward it. There is something else, something rarely spoken but deeply real. The psychology of sin is universal. Not because humans are weak, but because humans are wired for wanting. Wanting comfort, wanting connection, wanting control, wanting escape, wanting to feel alive. Sin manipulates these wants, twists them, promises fulfillment but delivers emptiness, offers relief but keeps the wound open, gives pleasure but steals peace. Yet even then, even in its strongest moment, sin cannot fully erase the voice inside you, the one that still remembers goodness, the one that still longs for alignment, not chaos, the one that still whispers, "You are meant for more than this." And that whisper, quiet as it may be, is the beginning of healing. Because the psychology of sin is not the final chapter. It is only the middle. The real story begins when awareness breaks through the fog. When you start to see the pattern, not just the temptation. When you recognize the trigger, not just the behavior. When you realize you are not born to fight your mind, but to understand it. The psychology of sin becomes the psychology of freedom the moment you stop fighting alone. The moment you recognize that sin is not a monster hiding in the dark. It is a human ache searching for an answer in the wrong places. And once you understand that, once you see the truth beneath the impulse, the grip loosens, the weight shifts, the shadow fades. Because sin is powerful, but it's not invincible. Not in the presence of awareness. Not in the presence of truth. Not in the presence of grace. And especially not in the presence of someone finally willing to face themselves gently. You realize, slowly, painfully, that sin doesn't begin where people think it begins. It does not start in the act. It starts in the permission, the tiny permission you whisper to yourself in a moment of weakness. The innocent, it's not that deep. The harmless, just this once. The quiet, nobody will know. These are not sentences. They are doors. And sin is patient. It doesn't need you to bolt the whole gate. A crack is enough, because a crack is an invitation. Psychologically, sin behaves like a storm pretending to be a breeze. It enters softly, adjusting itself to your rhythms, learning your rationalizations, studying your weak hours, your emotional triggers, the places you defend and the places you ignore. Sin is a strategist. It observes you more than you observe it. Then one day, without warning, it begins speaking your language, your excuses, your tone, your impulses. It stops feeling foreign. It starts sounding like you. That is when the real danger begins. Not when sin tempts you, but when sin begins to impersonate you. Because when sin becomes your voice, you no longer feel the need to hide. You no longer argue with yourself. You simply obey the version of you that sin has sculpted. A quieter, darker, diluted version of your original self. And here's the unsettling truth. Sin rarely aims to destroy you immediately. Immediate destruction is too dramatic, too noticeable. Sin prefers corrosion, slow rust, invisible decay, silent rewiring of your desires. Tiny compromises that stack like dust, unnoticed until the day you realize the whole room has changed color. Sin plays long-term chess with your mind. It does not attack your strengths. It seduces your vulnerabilities. It studies where your loneliness lives, where your ego breathes, where your hunger sleeps, where your wounds have never fully healed. Sin knows that unhealed places are entry points. And the sad reality is, every human has them. But the psychology of sin has an even deeper layer. Sin creates a cycle, not of wrongdoing, but of identity distortion. Because every time you fall into it, a whisper emerges. See? This is who you really are. And that whisper is far more dangerous than the act itself. Because if sin can convince you that your failure is your identity, then it never needs to tempt you again. You will tempt yourself. You will treat your weakness as destiny. You will treat your guilt as proof. You will treat your shame as a prophecy. This is how internal prisons are built. Not by chains, but by conclusions you accept about yourself. And then something even darker happens. The more you repeat a sin, the less you see it. The less you see it, the less you question it. The less you question it, the more natural it feels. The more natural it feels, the more it becomes part of you. Eventually, sin stops knocking. It uses your spare key, And just when you think the psychology of sin has reached its final layer, you discover something deeper. Sin never travels alone. Behind every sin is a shadow, a belief you have not yet confronted, a belief that you are unloved or unseen or unworthy or alone or trapped or inadequate or forgotten or not enough. Sin is not the disease. It is the symptom, a symptom of a deeper ache you haven't healed. And that is why sin feels strangely comforting at first. It promises relief before it delivers ruin. It doesn't come to destroy your life immediately. It comes to soothe your wounds falsely. It comes to give you shortcuts, illusions, escapes that feel like relief but end in regret. Sin is not powerful because it is sinful. Sin is powerful because it is familiar. It disguises itself as something you think you need: control, attention, escape, comfort, validation, pleasure, numbness, certainty. And by the time you realize it never gave you what it promised, it has already taken what it wanted. But here lies the final complexity of the psychology of sin. Sin thrives in secrecy. Anything hidden grows stronger. Anything confessed loses power. This is why people struggle silently. Not because sin is unbeatable, but because shame keeps them from calling for help. Shame isolates. Isolation weakens. Weakness amplifies temptation. And temptation grows into habit. Sin understands this cycle better than you do. It knows the longer you stay silent, the deeper its roots become. But the most profound truth is this: sin is not powerful because it is dark. Sin is powerful because the human heart is bright. Darkness only looks strong when light forgets itself. And when people fall, they think the fall defines them. But falling is not identity. It is humanity. What defines you is whether you rise, whether you recover, whether you confront the shadows you once avoided, whether you choose healing over hiding. Sin is a mirror that shows you who you are when you stop trying. Repentance is a mirror that shows you who you are when you start again. And somewhere deep inside you, the real you waits patiently, beneath the habits, beneath the guilt, beneath the cycles, beneath the battles. That version of you that has never stopped hoping to be free. Because freedom is not the absence of temptation. Freedom is the return of clarity, the return of identity, the return of wholeness. Sin tries to rewrite your story, but you were never meant to be a tragedy.